Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is the state of the road between Renkini and Ross Camp in Bulawayo. It's got potholes. A very familiar sight for the people in Zimbabwe. It's everywhere. City centers, the main roads, and of course, we're still in the rural areas. So there is nothing particularly surprising about this. But this road is barely a year old. And a concerned citizen took some photographs and sent them to the mayor of Bulawayo, Mayor David Coltart. It is said that the mayor responded quickly and promised to investigate. His swift response impressed many residents. Yeah, right. Main problem is, of course, those many residents do not know that Coltart is a hypocrite. He is seeing the speck in the eye of this road contractor, and yet he's failing to see the log in his own eye. If you want to solve Zimbabwe's crippling economic and political crisis, you cannot go after the small fish. You have to go after the big fish, the leaders themselves. David Coltart has been a member of the MDC, CCC, ever since its formation in 1999. He was in the GNU of 2008 to 2013, when the MDC had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have ended the one-party dictatorship in Zimbabwe. So the question we've got to ask, what happened? They failed to implement even one token reform. Not even one token reform. Why? Because of greed. Pure and simple. Not only that, they failed to implement even one token reform, and yet they continued to participate in flawed elections. Here is what David Coltart said in his book, the one I'm showing you on the screen there. This, he was commenting regarding the 2013 elections. He admits those 2013 elections were so flawed, so illegal, the only logical step was to withdraw. He wasn't the first one to say it. Tendai Biti said the same thing. But David Coltart in his book went one step further. He explained why he and his MDC friends failed to withdraw when they could clearly see that the process is flawed and illegal. And we must remind ourselves, the primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, so that the elections are not flawed and illegal. They failed to implement any reforms. And yet insisted in participating in flawed elections for no other reason than greed. And he admits it in that book. He clearly states MDC Nube would have withdrawn from those elections, but they did not, because they feared that if they did withdraw, the MDCT would participate and enjoy all the benefits of being elected. And so they participated out of greed, pure and simple. They could not resist participating. They are the ones who have perpetuated the Zanu PF dictatorship by participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. If we are serious about curing our crippling economic and political crisis in Zimbabwe, we have to deal with the leaders themselves, because they're the big fish. In 2023, David Coltart and his Triple C friends participated in 2023 elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed. That's Zanu PF was rigging those elections. And still they went ahead because they wanted a share of the spoils of power. In 2023, SADC in the AU, election observers, came out and said the election process was flawed and illegal. Something that David Coltart and his friends already knew, but here is the regional body and the continental body confirming the same thing. Guess what Coltart and his friends did? They still went ahead and took up their gravity seats, when the logical thing to have done at that point would have been to withdraw. They went ahead and thus gave the dictatorship legitimacy. On his X handle, Coltart shows himself together with the book that I was referring to, and next to it is, I suppose, a review from whoever reviewed this book, in which they are saying that what sets out Coltart's book, apart from other African political memoirs, is a beautiful, crisp, clear-eyed prose that reads at times like a thriller. For anyone who wants to understand the complexities and multiple truths of Zimbabwe, I suppose it goes on to say you should read the book. Well, I don't know about everything else, but I do know about the truth. As much as Coltart admitted that he and his fellow MDC friends have been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that by participating they're giving Zanu PF legitimacy, he was honest enough to admit that they're doing all this out of greed. That wasn't the whole truth at all. In his book, David Coltart has at the very best glossed over the fact that they failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU out of greed. The GNU of 2008 to 2013 was, without doubt, the golden opportunity for Zimbabwe to implement the democratic reforms and end the de facto one-party state. We wasted that opportunity. And in the case of Coltart and friends, ever since the GNU debacle, they have conned their followers to participate in flawed elections under the pretext that the opposition would win rigged elections because they've devised ways of winning rigged elections, knowing fully well that that was a lie. And his continued, and his friends' continued role in this failed state is only serving to perpetuate the dictatorship. And promising to go after the small fish is hypocrisy, and it stinks to the high heavens. Here is a man who has been on the political stage for the last 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU. He failed to implement even one token reform out of greed, and is in power, giving the regime legitimacy out of greed. And now he can see the speck in the road contractor's eye, but cannot see the log in his own eye. That is hypocrisy at its very worst. think about it. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.